My parents canceled my 18th birthday because my brother had another meltdown, and, as always, their world revolved around him. So I goes to the house. No calls, no goodbye. They thought I'd sulk, move on, and stay quiet. But weeks later, their picture-perfect family act snapped in half. And when the truth finally crashed through their front door, they realized exactly who they'd pushed too far and why everything was about to burn down. There are moments in life that hit you like a sucker punch. And for me, it was the day my parents canceled my 18th birthday. Not for some emergency, but because my spoiled younger brother might throw a tantrum. That's when I finally understood. In my own home, I was practically invisible. If you had told me a year ago that my own mom and dad would sacrifice my milestone birthday on the altar of my brother Leo's fragile ego, I would have laughed in your face. No way, I'd say. That's too obvious, even for them. But here we are. This wasn't just a canceled party. It was a cold, hard slap of reality. See, my family's world has always revolved around Leo. He's 16, and to put it mildly, he thinks the sun rises and sets just for him. If he gets a bad grade, mom's emailing the teacher, ready for battle. If he gets in trouble at school, dad's lecturing the principal about Leo's unique needs. And if Leo so much as frowns, the entire house goes silent. Everyone holds their breath, waiting to figure out how to make him happy again. Me? I've always been the easy kid. Good grades, stayed out of trouble, cooked my own food, did my own laundry. You'd think that would earn a little respect, maybe even some appreciation. Instead, it just made me vanish. So, as my 18th birthday approached, I didn't ask for much. Just a small dinner with my grandparents, a simple cake. I even saved up for my own gift, a used acoustic guitar I found online. For once, I just wanted to feel like my day mattered, like I wasn't just a background character in Leo's never-ending drama. Mom nodded vaguely when I mentioned my plans, and Dad mumbled something about checking his schedule. That was enough for me. I figured they were on board. I even spent 2 hours scrubbing the house, making it shine for the dinner. Then, the day before my birthday, Leo had an epic meltdown. Over the dumbest thing you can imagine, Dad wouldn't let him borrow the car for a late-night party. Doors slammed. Shoes flew down the hallway. He started screaming about how no one cared about him and how I always got whatever I wanted. I just sat in my room, headphones on, trying to block it out, but I could still hear every word. My chest felt so tight like a fist was squeezing it. Leo has always had this way of making me feel guilty just for existing. Eventually, there was a soft knock. "Ethan, we need to talk," Mom said. She sat on the edge of my bed, that familiar look on her face, the one that meant she was about to say something that would benefit Leo at my expense. "Honey," she began, in that sickly sweet tone she uses when she's trying to sound reasonable. "We're going to have to postpone your birthday dinner. Leo is really upset right now, and we don't want to trigger him with a big celebration tomorrow." I just stared at her. Postpone. It was my 18th birthday. You only turn 18 once. Her smile thinned, a little forced. "I know, but we can celebrate next weekend when things calm down. It'll be better for everyone. Better for everyone." Translation, better for Leo. My fists curled into the bedsheets. Dad poked his head in, chiming in with his usual line. "Just let this go, Ethan. Be the mature one here. The mature one." That phrase burned worse than anything else they'd said. I nodded slowly, but inside something shifted. For years, I'd been swallowing my frustration, telling myself it wasn't worth making a scene. But this was the line. They just told me point blank that my birthday was less important than keeping Leo from throwing a fit. The next morning, my grandparents called to wish me happy birthday. When I told them dinner was postponed, there was this long, heavy silence. Then Grandpa's voice, concerned. "Postponed for what?" I couldn't answer. I just felt this cold, quiet anger settle in my chest, like a storm forming far off in the distance. That was the moment I knew something had to change. That night, I sat in my room, staring at the blank space where a cake should have been, and I started planning my next move. The day after my canceled birthday felt eerily quiet, like the house itself knew something was off. I went through the motions, made breakfast, got ready for school, but there was this dull ache in my chest that just wouldn't go away. Mom acted cheerfully, like nothing had happened. Leo came downstairs late, yawning and smirking like he'd just won some great battle. He ruffled my hair as he passed. He knows I hate that, and said, "Cheer up, Ethan. It's just a birthday. Just a birthday." The words clung to me like wet clothes. That night, I overheard Mom and Dad talking in the kitchen while I was upstairs doing homework. They were praising Leo for calming down after his tantrum, like he'd performed some heroic feat. Then Mom said, "I think it's good we delayed Ethan's party. It shows Leo we're willing to compromise." Compromise? That's what they called erasing my 18th birthday. Over the next week, little things kept piling up, each one scraping against me like sandpaper. Leo decided he wanted to host a study session with his friends, which of course meant loud music and video games, not actual studying. Mom asked me to make myself scarce, so I wouldn't distract them. I ended up eating a sandwich in my room with headphones on, even though I had a big test the next day and really needed the dining table to work. Then there was the grocery store incident. Mom took me along to help her carry things. When Leo texted her asking for a specific energy drink, she sent me running back down 3 aisles to grab it. When I came back, slightly out of breath, she didn't even thank me. She just said, "You should be more considerate, Ethan. Leo's had a rough week." I wanted to shout, "So have I." But instead, I bit my tongue until I could taste iron. Things escalated 2 days later when I finally worked up the courage to ask about rescheduling my birthday dinner. I caught Mom while she was folding laundry and said, as casually as I could, "So, when are we doing my birthday thing? I like to invite Grandma and Grandpa." She didn't even look up. "Oh, honey, this weekend's no good. Leo's got a soccer game, and we're taking him out to dinner afterward to celebrate." "Okay, what about next weekend?" "We'll see," she said, and then changed the subject like we were discussing the weather. I walked back to my room in a fog. It was like someone had quietly erased my birthday from the calendar, like it never even existed. That night at dinner, Leo complained that he needed new cleats for his upcoming tournament. Dad immediately said, "We'll make it work," even though we just talked about how tight money was. I glanced at the corner of the fridge where the grocery budget list hung, and I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Didn't we say no extras this month?" Dad shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't be selfish, Ethan. Your brother's future depends on this tournament. These things are an investment." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it sounded. Leo's future involved playing JV soccer and quitting half his hobbies whenever they got hard. But I kept my mouth shut and finished my dinner in silence, my appetite gone. A few days later, I came home from school to find Leo sitting at the kitchen counter, eating the cake I'd bought for myself with my own money. It was a small vanilla cake I'd hidden in the back of the fridge, planning to eat with my grandparents when they finally came over, since Mom still hadn't scheduled anything. "Leo, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. He grinned, frosting on his face. "Oh, this was yours? Mom said I could have some." "Chill. It's just cake. Just cake. Just a birthday. Just me being erased one piece at a time." When I confronted Mom, she looked genuinely confused by my anger. "Ethan, you're overreacting. Leo needed a little pick-me-up after practice. Besides, you shouldn't be hiding food from the family." "It wasn't hidden," I said through gritted teeth. "It was mine. I paid for it." Her voice sharpened. "Watch your tone. We don't keep score in this family. You know how sensitive Leo is right now. Don't make things harder on him." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and something else, clarity. For years, I've been telling myself that if I just stayed quiet, if I just did the right thing, my parents would eventually notice me, appreciate me, treat me fairly. But the truth was staring me in the face. They weren't going to change. The next week was a blur of small indignities. Leo forgot to do his chores, so I was told to be a team player and take out the trash for him. He spilled soda on the living room rug and blamed me, and Mom believed him without question. And when I got an acceptance letter from the local college's honors program, Mom barely glanced at it before saying, "That's nice, dear," then turning to ask Leo how practice went. Each moment was like a drop of water wearing a hole into stone. My patience, my hope, my willingness to keep trying, all of it was eroding. Then came the breaking point. One Friday night, I came home from a late shift at my part-time job to find Leo sitting on my bed, scrolling through my phone. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice louder than I meant it to be. He shrugged. "Relax. I just wanted to see if you had that game download I wanted. You went through my phone without asking." "Big deal," he said, tossing it back on the bed. "You have nothing to hide anyway." When I told Mom and Dad, they didn't punish him. They didn't even tell him not to do it again. Instead, Dad said Leo was just curious. Maybe if you weren't so secretive, he wouldn't feel the need to snoop. I stood there stunned. They were blaming me. That night, I sat at my desk and made a list. Not of chores or homework, but of everything that had happened over the last month. The canceled birthday, the cake, the constant favoritism, the invasion of my privacy. By the time I was done, the page was full. My handwriting pressed so hard into the paper that it left dents. Looking at that list, I felt oddly calm. It was like seeing everything laid out finally gave me permission to admit that this wasn't just normal family stuff. This was a pattern, one that wasn't going to stop as long as I stayed under their roof. I started keeping my door locked whenever I could. I began moving some of my things, my guitar, my books, my laptop, into boxes and sliding them under my bed. Quietly, carefully, I was getting ready. And then, just as I was beginning to think I could survive until graduation, something happened that pushed everything past the point of no return. 2 weeks after Leo had gone through my phone, I came home one afternoon to find the front door wide open and voices carrying from inside. At first, I thought maybe we had company. But when I stepped into the living room, my heart dropped. My boxes, the ones I had carefully packed and slid under my bed, were sitting in the middle of the room, opened. My guitar case was leaning against the couch with the latches undone. My clothes were spilling out of the boxes, and my laptop sat on the coffee table like some kind of exhibit. Leo was sitting cross-legged on the floor, grinning smugly, and Mom and Dad were standing over everything with their arms crossed. "What is this?" Dad asked, gesturing to my things. I froze in the doorway. "My stuff," I said slowly, already feeling my pulse quicken. "Why are you hiding it under your bed?" Mom demanded, her voice sharp. "Are you planning to run away?" I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Leo piped up. "Told you he was being shady. I caught him packing last night." "You what?" I snapped, turning to him. He just smirked. "Yeah, I looked under your bed while you were in the shower. Pretty clever hiding spot, by the way. You went through my room." My voice cracked, partly from anger, partly from the raw humiliation of having my privacy violated again. "Leo was worried about you," Mom said, like he was some kind of hero. "He thought you might be in trouble, and it turns out he was right. Ethan, we need to talk about what's going on here." I clenched my jaw. What's going on is that I'm tired of being treated like a guest in my own house. Dad's expression hardened. "Watch your tone. This is our house. If you have a problem with how things are run here, you can say so respectfully, or you can leave." For a moment, the whole room went silent. Even Leo stopped smirking. I swallowed hard. "Maybe I will," I said, my voice low. Mom's eyes widened like I just threatened to burn the house down. "Ethan, don't be dramatic. You're 18. You don't understand how the world works. You wouldn't last a week out there on your own." That should have scared me. But instead, I felt a strange, almost dizzying calm. I didn't argue with them. I didn't yell. I just quietly gathered my things from the living room and carried them back upstairs. Leo kept making little comments as I passed. Things like, "Hope you like sleeping on park benches," and "Guess you don't care about family anymore." I ignored him, but each word felt like a push toward the edge of a cliff I'd been teetering on for years. The next day, I came home from school to find something that made my stomach drop even further. My laptop was gone. I tore apart my room looking for it, thinking maybe I just misplaced it, but it was nowhere. When I asked Mom, she said without a hint of guilt, "We took it away. We don't think it's healthy for you to be online so much right now. It's feeding this attitude you've had lately." "That laptop is mine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I paid for it with my job." "Then consider this a cooling-off period," Dad said from the kitchen table, sipping his coffee like we were discussing the weather. "You can have it back when we feel you've earned our trust again." I couldn't even speak. My throat felt tight. My ears were ringing. That laptop had everything on it, my schoolwork, my music recordings, even the scholarship essays I'd been working on for next semester. I spent the entire evening in my room, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the walls were closing in. This wasn't just about a canceled birthday anymore. This wasn't about Leo being spoiled or me being ignored. This was about control, about them taking away the one thing I'd worked for, the one thing that was mine, because they could. Later that night, I heard Leo laughing in the hallway. He was talking on the phone to one of his friends, bragging, "Yeah, my parents totally busted him. He was planning to move out, but now they've got him on lockdown. He's not going anywhere." That was the moment something in me snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I just sat up in bed and felt this cold, clear resolve settle over me. If they wanted to keep me trapped, they were about to find out what it was like to have me gone. Not just my presence, but everything I quietly did to keep the house running. The next morning, I started my silent rebellion. I stopped doing the extra chores I usually handled without being asked. No more unloading the dishwasher before school. No more tidying the living room. No more taking out the trash when Leo forgot. I ate breakfast and left my dishes in the sink like everyone else. Mom noticed first. "Ethan, can you clean up the kitchen before you head out?" "I don't have time," I said flatly, grabbing my backpack. Her eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me, I'm running late. Leo can do it." Leo groaned from the couch. "Why me?" "Because I'm not your maid," I said, and walked out the door before they could respond. That week, I started spending more time on my part-time job and less at home. I picked up extra shifts, stayed late, and told my boss I was available on weekends. First, it was just to get out of the house. But then I realized what I was really doing: saving money. Quietly, steadily, I was building an exit plan. But even as I distanced myself, the situation at home kept deteriorating. One night, I came home after closing at work to find Leo sitting at the kitchen table, waving my confiscated laptop around like a trophy. "Hey, look who finally came home," he said, grinning. "Mom said I could use this for homework since you don't need it right now." "You what?" I asked, my voice dead. He shrugged. "You weren't using it." "Don't worry, I didn't mess with your stuff." He paused. "Well, not much." He laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I walked straight past him and into my room, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. My heart was pounding so fast it felt like it might burst. That was the night I decided I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to make sure they understood exactly what it meant to lose me. And then, just as I was finalizing my plans to move out quietly, fate handed me the perfect opportunity, one that would make my absence impossible to ignore. The morning after Leo had paraded my laptop around like a trophy, I woke up with this strange heaviness in my chest. Not anger this time, something quieter, something hollow. It was like all the fight had drained out of me overnight, leaving just a dull ache. When I came downstairs, Mom was at the stove making pancakes for Leo, who was sitting at the table in his soccer gear, scrolling on my laptop. "Morning," Mom said brightly, like nothing was wrong. "I made extra if you want some." I just shook my head and grabbed an apple from the counter. "Ethan, sit down," Dad said from behind his newspaper. "You barely eat with us anymore." I wanted to tell him that maybe I'd feel like eating breakfast with them if they hadn't turned every meal into another round of Leo worship hour. But instead, I just said, "I'm not hungry," and walked out the door before either of them could press the issue. At school, I felt like a ghost. I sat through my classes, took notes, answered questions when called on, but I wasn't really there. I kept replaying the image of Leo's smug grin in my head over and over until it made my stomach twist. When I got home that afternoon, my room was a mess. Leo had apparently decided my closet was fair game now that I wasn't using my stuff anyway. Half my clothes were on the floor, and he'd taken my favorite hoodie. I found him in the living room wearing it. "Take it off," I said, my voice flat. "Relax," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "It looks better on me anyway." Something inside me broke then. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was more like the quiet snap of a thread that had been pulled too tight for too long. I didn't yell. I didn't fight him for the hoodie. I just turned around, went upstairs, and shut my door. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hands, staring at the screen. I had been looking at apartment listings in secret for days. But now I opened them again with new urgency. Studio apartments, shared rentals, anything cheap but livable. I called my boss and asked if I could take on full-time hours after graduation. She said yes without hesitation, adding, You're one of the hardest workers we've got, Ethan. It was the first kind word I'd heard in weeks. I started making lists, real lists this time, not just angry scribbles like before. What I would need to buy, what I would take with me, how much money I need for first month's rent and a deposit. I counted the cash I'd saved from work and realized I was closer than I thought. But the closer I got to being free, the worse things seemed to get at home. 2 days later, I came home to find that Leo had been cleaning my room. My drawers were open. My books were stacked wrong. And the few personal things I had left, my journal, my headphones, had been moved. "Why were you in my room?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. He shrugged. "Mom told me to tidy up since you never do it yourself anymore." "You're welcome." I laughed then. Not a happy laugh, but the kind that sounded a little too sharp. "You mean she told you to snoop?" "Congratulations, Leo. You found my socks. Truly heroic." "Don't be such a drama queen," he said, rolling his eyes. That night, I stayed late at work just to avoid going home. I cleaned up after everyone else had left, organized the shelves, even mopped the floor. Anything to stall walking back into that house. When I finally did get home, the lights were off and everyone was asleep. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the silence, feeling the strange mix of sadness and relief. The next morning, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "Ethan, we're worried about you. You've been so distant lately." I almost choked on my coffee. "You're worried about me now?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't take that tone with me. You're still living under our roof, and we expect respect." Respect? The word hit me like a slap. I didn't argue. I just walked past her, out the door, and spent the entire day at school thinking about how strange it was that they expected respect, but never gave any back. That weekend, I told my grandparents what had been happening. We met for coffee, just the three of us. And when I told them about the canceled birthday, the confiscated laptop, the invasion of my room, they both went very quiet. Grandpa finally said, "Ethan, you don't have to stay there if it's hurting you." "Where would I go?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've always been responsible. If you find a place, we'll help you with a deposit. Just say the word." I swallowed hard. "Are you sure?" She smiled sadly. "Sweetheart, you deserve to feel safe where you live. If your parents can't give you that, then it's time to find it for yourself." That night, I went home and started packing in earnest. Not the secret, cautious packing from before. Real packing. I put my clothes into bags, wrapped up my books, and quietly moved a few things into the trunk of my car when no one was looking. Each trip felt like a small act of rebellion, like I was reclaiming a piece of myself with every box I carried out. But just when I thought I was finally getting ahead, just when I could almost see the finish line, something happened that made everything 100 times worse and forced me to move faster than I'd ever planned. I woke up the next morning to sunlight spilling across my room. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel that usual heaviness pressing down on my chest. Instead, I felt something sharper, determination. Everything in my room was half-packed now. Boxes stacked neatly in a corner, bags zipped and ready. If anyone walked in, they'd know exactly what I was planning. But I didn't care anymore. Hiding it got me nowhere. Before school, I stopped by the bank to deposit the cash I'd been keeping in a shoebox. My savings account balance had never looked this good, nearly enough for a deposit and first month's rent. Seeing that number on the screen gave me a little surge of power. For so long, I'd felt trapped, dependent, like my parents were holding all the cards. But now I could feel the ground shifting under my feet. I was building my own way out, brick by brick. At school, I stayed late in the library working on my scholarship essays. With my laptop still confiscated, I had to use the school computers, but I didn't care. In fact, staying late meant I didn't have to go home right away. By the end of the week, I had 3 applications finished and submitted. Each one felt like a quiet little victory, a step toward the future I was building that had nothing to do with my parents' approval. My boss noticed my new energy, too. One evening after closing, she called me in her office and said, "You've been stepping up a lot lately. I'd like to make you a shift lead." I blinked. "Are you serious?" She nodded. "You've earned it. Comes with a raise. Not huge, but enough to make a difference." I walked out of that office feeling 10 feet tall. It wasn't just about the money, though that helped. It was about someone recognizing my effort, my reliability, things my family had dismissed as just being the easy kid. For once, someone saw me. By the end of the month, I had found a small studio apartment 10 minutes from work. It wasn't much. A single room with a kitchenette and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it was mine. The landlord was an older guy who seemed kind, but businesslike. When I handed him the deposit and first month's rent, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from exhilaration. That night, I sat in my car outside the apartment building, just staring at the key in my hand. This was it, my ticket out. At home, things were still tense. Leo had started sulking more now that I wasn't reacting to his provocations. He'd toss my things around, take my charger, hide my shoes. But I didn't give him the satisfaction of blowing up anymore. Every time he tried to get under my skin, I just thought about the key in my pocket and smiled to myself. Mom noticed a change, too. One evening, as I was heading upstairs with a laundry basket, she stopped me at the bottom of the stairs. "You've been very quiet lately," she said cautiously. "I've been busy," I replied, keeping my tone even. She frowned. "Busy with what?" "Work, school, my future." Something flickered across her face. Confusion, concern, maybe even guilt. But she didn't press me further. My grandparents came over that weekend, and this time I didn't hold back. I showed them pictures of the apartment, told them about my new promotion, even mentioned that I'd been approved for a small scholarship. Grandpa beamed and said, "That's our boy. You're really making something of yourself." It had been so long since I'd felt proud of myself without someone immediately tearing me down. I couldn't stop smiling the rest of the day. The next few days felt almost like living a double life. At school and work, I was this calm, capable version of myself who was steadily building a future. At home, I was quiet, polite, and almost invisible, but only because I wanted to be. Every time I folded another shirt into a box or slid another bag into my car, I felt more in control. I started removing my presence from the house little by little. The photos of me on the fridge disappeared one by one. My shoes were no longer by the front door. My guitar stand was empty. It was like I was slowly erasing myself from their world, preparing them for what was coming without them, even realizing it. Then came a day I got my laptop back. It happened casually, almost anticlimactically. I came home from work and found it sitting on my bed with a sticky note that said, "We trust you again." I stared at it for a long time, then laughed. An actual laugh this time, not bitter or angry. I didn't need their permission anymore. I had already built a life outside of their control, and no one could take that from me. That night, I used the laptop to make a checklist of the final things I needed. A couple of pieces of furniture, cleaning supplies, groceries for the new place. I ordered most of it online and had it shipped directly to the apartment. By the time the weekend rolled around, I was ready. My car was packed full. My savings were enough to cover at least 2 months of expenses, and my apartment key was warm in my pocket. But before I could make my quiet exit, before I could slip away without a scene, something happened that accelerated everything and turned my quiet departure into something much bigger than I'd ever imagined. 2 days before I planned to move out, I came home early from work and walked into the house just in time to overhear a conversation that changed everything. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen talking in low voices, and Leo was sitting at the counter eating cereal. I was about to slip past and head upstairs when I caught my own name. "He's been pulling away for months," Mom was saying. "I don't understand what we did wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong," Dad replied, his tone dismissive. "He's just going through a phase. Once he sees how hard it is out there, he'll come crawling back. He doesn't realize how much he relies on us." Leo snorted. "Yeah, good luck to him. He can't even keep his room clean. He'll be back in a week." I froze in the hallway. They weren't worried. They were waiting for me to fail. They thought my independence was some kind of rebellion, a tantrum like Leo's, but quieter. They weren't scared to lose me. They were convinced I'd be back, begging them for help. For a long moment, I just stood there, heart pounding, a cold clarity washing over me. This wasn't just about getting out anymore. It was about proving them wrong, about making sure they understood that I could survive, even thrive without them. That night, I sat in my room with my laptop open, staring at the glowing screen and thinking. I wasn't just going to leave quietly. I was going to make sure they felt the weight of me being gone. Not in a vindictive way, but in a way that made them realize what they had taken for granted. I started with the practical things. I gathered every bill, subscription, and account that had my name on it. The internet plan, the streaming services, even the shared family cloud storage that I have been paying for since I got my job sophomore year. One by one, I changed the payment methods or canceled them outright. If I was leaving, I wasn't going to keep footing the bill for a house that no longer felt like mine. Then I moved on to my responsibilities around the house. I'd always been the one to quietly fix things, replace light bulbs, unclog the sink, keep the fridge organized. I made a mental list of all the little tasks no one noticed until they weren't done. It wasn't petty. It was practical. If they were so sure I'd be back, they were about to get a taste of what it was like without me there to keep things running smoothly. I also started talking to my grandparents more. They were still quietly supportive, though I could tell they were trying not to take sides. One afternoon, Grandma slipped me an envelope with a few hundred in it. "Consider it a little cushion," she said softly. "Just until you get settled." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you. I promise I won't waste it." She smiled. "You've never wasted anything, Ethan. That's why we know you're going to be okay." That night, I went to the apartment after work to drop off the last of my boxes. It felt surreal standing in the middle of that empty space, imagining how it would look once I brought in the rest of my things. For the first time, I let myself really picture it. Coming home to a place that was mine, eating dinner without being interrupted, playing my guitar without Leo pounding on the wall. But as much as I wanted to just stay there right then, I knew I had one last thing to do before I left. One last piece to put into place that would make this exit unforgettable. The final push came from Leo himself. Ironically enough, the night before I planned to move out, I came home to find him in my room again, this time sitting on my bed and scrolling through my phone. I didn't even bother asking why. I just held out my hand and said, "Give it back." He smirked but handed it over. "You really should put a passcode on that thing if you don't want people going through it." "I did," I said flatly. "You guessed it." He laughed. "What? Your birthday?" Too easy. Something about the way he said it, like my birthday was a joke. Like he had beaten me at some game, made my stomach clench. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about showing all of them that I wasn't someone they could control or dismiss whenever it was convenient. After dinner, I locked my door and spent the rest of the night making sure everything was ready. My car was already packed except for the essentials I'd need in the morning. I double-checked the cancellations, the payments, the address changes. I even scheduled the internet service to end the day after I left, just to make sure the house wouldn't go dark until I was safely gone. And then I did something I'd been debating for days. I wrote a letter. It wasn't angry or dramatic. No yelling in all caps. No accusations. Just a clear, calm explanation of why I was leaving, how I felt, and what I needed. I told them I wasn't running away. I wasn't punishing them. I was choosing myself for once. When I finished, I set it on my desk where they'd find it after I was gone. Then I sat in the dark for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the house. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped by it. I felt ready. Tomorrow I would leave, and when they woke up, they'd finally see what it looked like when I wasn't there to hold everything together. The morning I left, the house was still quiet when I woke up. Sunlight was just beginning to creep across my floor, lighting up the stacks of boxes that were no longer hidden, but standing out in the open like silent witnesses. I dressed quietly, packed the last few items in my backpack, my journal, my headphones, the letter, and took one last look around my room. It didn't feel like my room anymore. The posters were gone. The shelves were bare. The space almost echoed. For the first time, instead of sadness, I felt relief. Downstairs, I could hear the faint sounds of Mom clattering around in the kitchen. Leo was still asleep. I could tell from the silence, and Dad hadn't left for work yet. My heart was beating fast, but I moved with a kind of calm focus, the way you do when you've rehearsed something over and over in your head. I set the letter neatly on my desk where they couldn't miss it, then grabbed my guitar case and my backpack. Each step down the stairs felt heavier than the last, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was finally doing. Before I left, I did the last few things on my mental checklist. I unplugged the Wi-Fi router and tucked it under my arm. It was in my name, after all, and I had every right to take it. Then I grabbed the small basket by the front door where we kept spare house keys. I took mine off the ring and set it on top with a quiet little click. When I stepped outside, the early morning air hit me like a shock. My car was packed full. Boxes, bags, a few pieces of furniture I'd managed to fit in the back seat. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and for a moment just sat there staring at the house. No big dramatic goodbye, no yelling, no slamming doors. Just me finally choosing to leave. By the time everyone woke up, I was already in my new apartment, unloading the car. I spent the entire morning moving in, arranging my few belongings, making the space feel like mine. The silence was different here. Not tense or heavy, just quiet, peaceful. Around noon, my phone started blowing up. First it was Mom. "Ethan, where are you? Why is your room empty?" Then Dad. "Call us right now. This is unacceptable." Then Leo, of all people. "Dude, Mom is freaking out." Dad's yelling. "What did you do?" I ignored all of them until I had finished setting up the Wi-Fi in my apartment. Then, when I was finally sitting on my little secondhand couch with my laptop on my knees, I texted back a single line. "Check the letter." It didn't take long for the next call to come in. This time it was Dad again. I let go to voicemail. His voice was tight, almost panicked. "Ethan, we read your note. You can't just leave like this. We need to talk. Call us back." I didn't call. By evening, the messages had gone from angry to pleading. Mom wrote, "We didn't realize you felt this way. Please come home so we can talk." I sat back against the couch and let out a slow breath. For the first time, they weren't dismissing my feelings, weren't telling me to be the mature one. For the first time, they sounded like they actually saw me. That weekend, the real fallout began. I heard from my grandparents that Mom and Dad had been scrambling to figure out how to pay for the bills I'd been covering. The internet was shut off for a full day before they could get it switched into their names. Leo had a meltdown when he couldn't play video games, which apparently set off another round of shouting matches between everyone. Part of me almost felt guilty hearing about the chaos. Almost. But then I remembered all the times I'd been told to just let it go. All the times my own needs had been brushed aside for Leo's comfort. And the guilt faded. I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. But I didn't rush to fix things for them either. Every time I was tempted to step in and smooth things over like I always had, I reminded myself this was exactly what they needed to feel. Meanwhile, my own life was finally starting to take shape. I bought a small second-hand table for my kitchen, a thrift store lamp for the corner of the living room. Each little addition made the apartment feel more like home. I started sleeping better than I had in months, waking up without that knot of dread in my stomach. At work, my boss pulled me aside and told me she'd put me on the schedule for more closing shifts since I was so reliable. The extra money meant I could start saving faster. And for once, every cent I earned went to my own future, not to keeping the household running for everyone else. Leo tried calling me a few times. First to taunt me, "Bet you're miserable out there." And then to complain, "Mom is making me do your chores now." Thanks a lot. I didn't respond to either. Instead, I focused on building my new life. I signed up for an extra night class to get ahead on my college credits. I started playing my guitar again, something I hadn't done in weeks because every time I picked it up at home, Leo would bang on the wall and yell at me to stop. Now I could play as loud as I wanted, as late as I wanted, and no one said a word. The night, I finally strung up a few posters on the wall and sat cross-legged on the floor eating takeout. I realized I was smiling. A real smile this time. Not the tight, polite kind I'd worn at home, but the kind that came from somewhere deep, somewhere free. And then just as I was settling into this new rhythm, just as I was starting to feel like I'd finally taken back control of my life, something happened that brought all the simmering tension with my family to a boil and forced them to face the consequences of what they'd done to drive me away. The fallout came faster and harder than I ever expected. A few days after I'd settled into my apartment, my grandparents called me. Grandpa's voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "Well, you certainly shook things up over there," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked, sitting up straighter. "They've been fighting nonstop," Grandma chimed in. "Your mom's been crying. Your dad's been pacing. And Leo, well, apparently he's not taking the loss of Wi-Fi very gracefully." I almost laughed. For years, every family argument had somehow been about keeping Leo calm, keeping Leo happy. And now they were finally seeing what happened when the one person who kept everything quietly running, me, stepped away. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. It was Mom. This time I answered. "Ethan," she said, her voice tired. "Can we please talk? We need to see you." "I'm listening," I said carefully. We didn't realize you felt so neglected. We thought you were okay. You never complained." I took a long breath before answering. "That was the problem, Mom. I kept quiet because every time I tried to speak up, I was told to be the mature one. My needs never came first. They barely came second. You canceled my 18th birthday to avoid upsetting Leo. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her inhale shakily. "I do now," she admitted. "Your dad and I, we didn't handle that right. We let Leo run the house because it was easier than fighting him. But losing you like this, it's not what we wanted." For a moment, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered all those nights I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, wondering why no one seemed to care about me, why I always had to be the one to sacrifice. "I'm not coming back," I said gently but firmly. "I'm happy here. I feel like myself here. If you want to see me, you can visit. But this is my home now." She didn't argue. She just said, "Okay," in a small voice, and we hung up. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. Dad called me once, not to lecture me, but to apologize. It was awkward. He stumbled over his words like he wasn't sure how to say them, but I could tell he meant it. "We should have celebrated your birthday, son. We should have made you feel valued." "I'm sorry." That apology landed heavier than I expected. For years, I've been waiting to hear those words. Leo didn't call, but I heard through the grapevine that his attitude had started to backfire now, that he didn't have me to blame for everything. Mom and Dad had finally started making him do his own chores, pay for some of his own things, and face consequences when he messed up. Apparently, he hated it. Meanwhile, my life was only getting better. My raise kicked in, and for the first time, I had money left over at the end of the month. I started cooking for myself, badly at first, but I got better, and my tiny apartment began to feel like a sanctuary. The peace was addictive. No slammed doors, no shouting matches, no walking on eggshells every time Leo was in a bad mood. One Saturday morning, a few months later, I invited my grandparents over for breakfast. We sat at my thrifted kitchen table, drinking coffee and laughing. And when they left, Grandma hugged me tight and whispered, "You've built something good here. We're proud of you." After they left, I sat on the couch with my guitar in my lap, strumming lazily, and I thought about how far I'd come. The house I grew up in was still standing, but I wasn't a piece of it anymore. And for the first time, that didn't hurt. The final moment of closure came on my 19th birthday. I didn't expect anything. But that morning, there was a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Mom and Dad were standing there, awkward but sincere, holding a small cake with a single candle. "We'd like to try again," Mom said softly. "If you'll let us." I hesitated for a long moment before stepping aside and letting them in. We sat at my little table, and they sang to me, off-key, slightly embarrassed, but genuine. As I blew out the candle, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't about making them feel guilty. It was about finally being seen, finally being heard. And they were hearing me now in a way they never had before. When they left, Mom hugged me tight and whispered, "Happy birthday, Ethan. Thank you for not giving up on us." I closed the door, leaned against it for a moment, and smiled. They had learned what life was like without me, and they had come back ready to do better. And I had learned that my voice mattered, that my life could be my own, no matter what house I lived in. As I sat back down with the last slice of cake and picked up my guitar, I thought to myself, this was the best birthday I'd ever had because this time it was truly mine.